Welcome to Afghanistan, a land that surprises you the moment you begin to learn about it. Afghanistan is not a simple country. It is not a quiet story. It is a place of mountains that touch the sky, deserts that test human strength, and valleys where ancient civilizations once lived. For thousands of years, empires passed through this land. But Afghanistan was never easy to control. This country is very different. It sits at the crossroads of Asia, where East meets West, where traders, warriors, poets, and travelers crossed paths. Afghanistan has seen glory, pain, resilience, and survival more than most places on Earth. It has been broken many times, yet it has never disappeared. To understand Afghanistan is to understand endurance. To hear its story is to hear the voice of history itself. Now, let us begin. Part 1. Origins and an Ancient Crossroads. Afghanistan is one of the oldest lands in human history. Long before modern borders, flags, or governments existed, people were already living, traveling, and trading across this region. The mountains, valleys, and deserts of Afghanistan have witnessed thousands of years of human movement. This land did not grow quietly. It grew through contact, conflict, and connection. Afghanistan sits in a unique place on the map. It lies between Central Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East. Because of this location, it became a natural crossroads. Traders, armies, and explorers passed through it again and again. Some came to trade. Others came to conquer. Very few came and left without being changed. In ancient times, this land was not called Afghanistan. It was known by many names, depending on the empire that ruled it. Parts of it were once part of ancient Persia. Other parts were connected to India and Central Asia. The people living here spoke different languages and followed different traditions, but they shared one thing: adaptability. One of the earliest known civilizations connected to this land was linked to the Indus Valley and Persian worlds. Trade routes passed through Afghan valleys, carrying precious goods like silk, spices, stones, and ideas. These routes later became part of what we now call the Silk Road. The Silk Road was not a single road. It was a network of paths that connected China to the Middle East and Europe. Afghanistan stood in the middle of this network. Caravans stopped here to rest, trade, and exchange culture. Because of this, Afghanistan became a meeting point of civilizations. Religion, language, art, and science flowed through the region. One of the most important early empires to control this land was the Achaemenid Persian Empire around the 6th century BCE. Persian rulers brought systems of administration, roads, and communication. They respected local cultures while maintaining control. This helped the region stay connected to a larger world. Then came one of the most famous conquerors in history, Alexander the Great. In the 4th century BCE, Alexander marched his army across vast lands, including what is now Afghanistan. He faced fierce resistance. The terrain was harsh. The people were proud and unwilling to submit easily. Although Alexander conquered the land, his control was never simple. After Alexander's death, Greek influence remained. Cities were built. Art and culture mixed Greek and local styles. This created a unique blend of East and West. Even today, traces of this period can be found in archaeology and ancient stories. Over time, new powers rose and fell. Buddhism once flourished in Afghanistan. Large monasteries were built. Scholars traveled through the region. One of the most famous symbols of this era was the giant Buddha statues of Bamiyan, carved into the cliffs. They stood for centuries as a sign of spiritual and cultural life. Later, Islam arrived in the region during the 7th century. Slowly, over generations, Islam became the dominant religion. It shaped laws, culture, art, and daily life. Afghan society became deeply connected to Islamic traditions, while still preserving local customs and tribal values, played a central role in Afghan life. Unlike many places ruled by strong centralized governments, Afghanistan was often organized around tribes and local leaders. Loyalty to family, tribe, and land was stronger than loyalty to distant rulers. This made Afghanistan difficult to control from the outside. Many empires learned this lesson the hard way. The land itself also shaped its people. High mountains like the Hindu Kush created natural barriers. Villages were often isolated. People learned to rely on themselves and their communities. Independence was not just a political idea, it was a way of life. As centuries passed, Afghanistan continued to absorb influences while maintaining its identity. Poets, scholars, and warriors emerged from this land. Persian literature flourished. Trade continued. Culture remained rich and layered. But Afghanistan was never allowed to rest for long. In the medieval period, new conquerors arrived, including the Mongols under Genghis Khan. Their invasions were devastating. Cities were destroyed. Populations were reduced. Yet, even after such destruction, life returned. Communities rebuilt. The land endured. By the early modern era, Afghanistan stood between powerful neighbors: Persia, Central Asian Khanates, and the Indian subcontinent. Control shifted often. Local rulers gained and lost power, but one thing remained constant. Afghanistan resisted complete domination. In the 18th century, a turning point came. Ahmad Shah Durrani emerged as a strong leader. He united many Afghan tribes and founded what is often considered the beginning of the modern Afghan state. He is remembered as the father of the nation. Under his leadership, Afghanistan gained a sense of political identity. For the first time, Afghanistan began to exist not just as a crossroads, but as a nation. However, unity was fragile. Tribal divisions, geography, and foreign interest continued to challenge stability. Still, the idea of Afghanistan had taken root. By the time the modern world began to form, Afghanistan was already ancient. It was a land shaped by empires, but owned by its people. A place crossed by history, yet never erased by it. This deep, complex foundation explains why Afghanistan reacts strongly to outside pressure, why independence matters so deeply, and why its story is unlike any other. But the greatest tests were still ahead. Foreign powers were watching. Empires were expanding. And Afghanistan was about to become the center of a new global struggle. Part 2. Empires, Resistance, and a Land That Would Not Break. As the modern world began to take shape, Afghanistan found itself in a dangerous position. Powerful empires were expanding, competing for land, influence, and control. Because of its location, Afghanistan became more than a country. It became a buffer, a shield, and a prize. This period would define Afghanistan's reputation in history. In the 19th century, two great empires dominated the region, the British Empire and the Russian Empire. Both wanted influence in Central and South Asia. Britain feared that Russia might move south and threaten British-controlled India. Russia wanted access to warmer regions and new routes. This rivalry became known as the Great Game. Afghanistan stood directly in the middle. Britain did not want to rule Afghanistan completely. Instead, it wanted control over Afghan foreign policy and leadership. Afghan rulers, however, valued independence above all else. This difference led to conflict. The First Anglo-Afghan War began in 1839. British forces entered Afghanistan, believing they could easily control it. At first, they succeeded, but they misunderstood the land and the people. Afghan resistance grew quickly. Local fighters knew the terrain. They moved through mountains and valleys with ease. British supply lines were stretched and vulnerable. What followed became one of the most famous disasters in British military history. During a retreat from Kabul in 1842, almost an entire British force was destroyed. Only one man reached safety. This event shocked the world and sent a clear message. Afghanistan was not easy to conquer. Britain tried again later, leading to the Second Anglo-Afghan War. This time, Britain gained some influence but still failed to fully control the country. Afghanistan remained independent in its internal affairs. This pattern repeated again and again. Foreign powers entered Afghanistan. They underestimated it. They paid a heavy price. Afghanistan became known as a land that resisted outsiders fiercely. Despite constant pressure, Afghan leaders worked to protect sovereignty. In 1919, after the Third Anglo-Afghan War, Afghanistan gained full control over its foreign policy. It became one of the first countries in the region to assert complete independence from colonial influence. Under King Amanullah Khan, Afghanistan attempted modernization. Schools were opened. Laws were reformed. Women were encouraged to participate in public life. Afghanistan tried to move forward quickly, but change came too fast. Many traditional communities resisted these reforms. Tribal leaders feared loss of power. Religious conservatives worried about losing cultural values. The result was unrest and rebellion. Amanullah was eventually forced to step down. This moment revealed a central tension in Afghan history, the struggle between modernization and tradition. Throughout the 20th century, Afghanistan continued to walk this difficult path. For decades, it remained relatively neutral on the global stage. It was not a colony. It was not deeply industrialized. Life in rural areas remained traditional. Kabul, the capital, slowly developed, but much of the country stayed isolated. Then, in the late 1970s, everything changed. In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. The Soviet government wanted to support a friendly Afghan regime and maintain influence in the region. Once again, a superpower believed it could control Afghanistan. Once again, it was wrong. Afghan resistance fighters, known as the Mujahideen, rose up. They fought using guerrilla tactics. They knew the land. They used mountains as protection. They received support from other countries, including the United States, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia. The war was long and brutal. Villages were destroyed. Millions of Afghans became refugees. Lives were lost on a massive scale. Yet the resistance did not collapse. After nearly 10 years of fighting, the Soviet Union withdrew in 1989. It was another moment that reinforced Afghanistan's reputation as a land that breaks empires. But victory did not bring peace. After the Soviets left, Afghanistan fell into civil war. Different groups fought for power. Cities were damaged. Law and order collapsed. Ordinary people suffered the most. Out of this chaos, a new force emerged: the Taliban. In the mid-1990s, the Taliban took control of much of the country. They promised order and stability. Many Afghans, exhausted by war, initially welcomed them. But the Taliban imposed extremely strict rules. Women were denied education and work. Cultural expression was limited. Fear became part of daily life. Afghanistan became isolated from much of the world. Then came September 11th, 2001. After terrorist attacks in the United States, attention turned to Afghanistan. The Taliban were accused of sheltering those responsible. The United States and its allies invaded Afghanistan, beginning a new chapter in the country's long history of foreign intervention. Once again, Afghanistan became the center of global conflict. The Taliban government collapsed quickly, but the war did not end. A new Afghan government was formed with international support. Schools reopened. Infrastructure was rebuilt. Millions of children, including girls, returned to education. For a time, hope returned. But deep problems remained. Corruption weakened institutions. Rural areas remained unstable. Insurgent attacks continued. Foreign troops stayed for years, trying to stabilize the country. For many Afghans, life existed between hope and fear. After 20 years of war, foreign forces withdrew in 2021. The Taliban returned to power. The world watched as Afghanistan entered yet another uncertain period. History seemed to repeat itself. Empires came with plans. Afghanistan responded with resistance. The cost was always heavy. Through every invasion, every war, and every collapse, one truth remained clear. Afghanistan endured. Its people adapted. Its culture survived. Its identity did not disappear. The story of Afghanistan is not only about war. It is about resilience, dignity, and survival under constant pressure. To understand Afghanistan, one must understand this long cycle of interference and resistance. But history does not stop with conflict. The question now is not only how Afghanistan survived the past, but what it can become in the future. Part 3. Identity, Endurance, and the Road Ahead. As Afghanistan entered the 21st century, it carried the weight of its entire history on its shoulders. Few countries in the world have experienced so many invasions, wars, and interruptions to peace. Yet Afghanistan still existed. Its borders remained. Its people remained. Its identity, though wounded, was not erased. To understand modern Afghanistan, one must look beyond headlines and conflicts. Afghanistan is first and foremost a human story. Afghan society is deeply rooted in family, community, and tradition. In many parts of the country, life is organized around villages and tribes. Elders are respected. Hospitality is considered a moral duty. Even in the hardest conditions, Afghans are known for welcoming guests, sharing food, and protecting honor. Culture has always been a source of strength. Poetry holds a special place in Afghan life. For centuries, poets wrote about love, faith, loss, and courage. Persian and Pashto poetry shaped Afghan identity long before modern borders existed. Music, storytelling, and oral tradition passed wisdom from generation to generation. Despite decades of war, this cultural memory survived. After 2001, Afghanistan experienced a brief but important period of change. Cities like Kabul, Herat, and Mazar-e-Sharif saw development. Roads, schools, and hospitals were rebuilt. Young people connected with the outside world through technology and education. A new generation grew up with different hopes. Women returned to schools and universities. Journalists reported freely. Artists, musicians, and writers re-emerged. For many Afghans, this period showed what was possible. But progress was uneven. Rural areas remained poor. Violence continued. Political divisions weakened trust. Foreign presence created dependency in some areas and resentment in others. Afghanistan was trying to rebuild while still fighting. This created emotional exhaustion. When the Taliban returned to power in 2021, many Afghans felt history repeating itself. Fear returned, especially for women, journalists, and those connected to the previous government. Millions faced uncertainty. Many left the country. Others stayed, trying once again to adapt. Afghanistan entered another quiet struggle, not always with bombs, but with restrictions, isolation, and survival. And yet even now, Afghanistan is not empty. Children still play, markets still open, families still gather. Life continues. This is one of the most important lessons Afghanistan teaches the world. Afghanistan is not defined only by war. It is defined by endurance. For centuries, outside powers tried to reshape Afghanistan according to their own plans. They brought armies, ideologies, systems, and promises. But Afghanistan never fully became what outsiders wanted it to be. Instead, it remained itself. This resistance is not only military, it is cultural and psychological. Afghan identity values independence deeply. Control from the outside is viewed with suspicion. Authority must be local, personal, and earned. This explains much of Afghanistan's history. It also explains why quick solutions have always failed. The future of Afghanistan cannot be imposed. It must grow from within. Education, stability, and opportunity must align with Afghan culture, not replace it. History has shown that ignoring this reality leads to collapse. For English learners, Afghanistan's story offers something rare. It shows how language connects us to people, not politics. It reminds us that countries are not governments. They are humans, memories, and voices. Learning English through Afghanistan's story is not about agreement or judgment. It is about understanding. Understanding why a land can suffer endlessly and still stand. Understanding why identity matters more than power. Afghanistan's mountains have seen empires rise and fall. Its valleys have absorbed footsteps from every direction. Its people have learned to survive uncertainty as a normal condition of life. The story of Afghanistan is unfinished. It is still being written by farmers, students, mothers, poets, and children, not by headlines alone. And like every great story, it carries pain, beauty, tragedy, and hope together. To listen to Afghanistan is to listen carefully. To learn from Afghanistan is to learn humility. To remember Afghanistan is to remember human resilience. This is not the end of Afghanistan's story. It is a pause. And history tells us that Afghanistan has always returned from pauses, still standing, still resisting, still alive.